Jihad in Arabic means struggle, and the word has many connotations, but the primary meaning in Islamic teaching is warfare against unbelievers in order to subjugate them under the rule of Islamic law as a political system in which non-Muslims are denied basic rights. And this jihad must continue until the end of the world. And it is always part of the imperative of the Islamic religion to wage war by various means against non-Muslims in order to accomplish this. The Islamization of Germany is more advanced than of that of the United States. In Germany, as we saw at the demonstration in Stuttgart yesterday, we saw that the forces for Islamization and their leftist allies are far more aggressive and violent than they are as of yet in the United States. But I expect that since the official posture of the German government and the US government are the same about Islamization, and that is to be completely indifferent to it and warmly welcoming of it, that the situation in Germany will be repeated in the United States in the coming years, and it will only get worse in both. I would expect that neither one is very much aware, and probably in Europe there is more awareness of the problem because it is more advanced in Europe in general than there is in the United States. There is no one in the United States, and of course no one in Germany either, like Geert Wilders in the Netherlands. And that's because the problem is much more advanced there. And I expect that such figures will arise in the future as the situation becomes more difficult. But at this point, I wouldn't say there's very much awareness either in Germany or the United States of this problem. I think that Islamization is the greatest threat that Germany faces and that the European countries in general face, because the non-Muslim population is not growing at the same rate as the Muslim population. And so there will eventually be very large minorities or even majorities of Muslims in these countries. And of course the situation in that regard is worse in other European countries than it is in Germany. Nonetheless, there is no indication whatsoever that the Turkish minority or the Muslim minority in general in Germany is going to discard the elements of Islam that are violent and supremacist and political. And so those are only going to become more and more asserted as time goes by, and that will cause more strife in German society. Germany's greatest chance would be to wake up to what we saw yesterday at the demonstration, and to understand that these violent demonstrators are only going to grow more assertive when they see that there are no consequences to what they do, and that there will be increasing civil strife in Germany unless this is stopped. But that is also an opportunity to become aware of this now and stop it before it's too late. Yes, you saw it a little bit yesterday when you were interviewing some of the protesters, and they couldn't explain to you why they were there, and they understood that Islam was a religion of peace and just another religion, and so that any opposition to it would be bigotry or even racism. The Islamic faith is the only religion in the world that has a propaganda arm, that has a concerted and conscious effort to whitewash elements of it that are negative and to make unbelievers think that these elements of Islam do not exist or are just the province of a tiny minority of extremists who have twisted the teachings of the true religion. And this is a campaign designed to make non-Muslims keep their guard down and be complacent in the face of increased Islamic populations that are growing. The disinformation is put out on a very sophisticated level, and we are told all these plain falsehoods about Islam, such that it is peaceful and that it does not contain these violent and supremacist elements. The problem is that these things are abetted. This disinformation is eagerly taken up by the leftist media and political establishment, and is used to advance its own agenda. They work through a variety of means. They work through the media, they work through the government. There are Islamic officials who appeal to government agencies and authorities to establish some kind of official apparatus to deal with the Muslim populations, and then these are staffed by Muslims who perpetuate this kind of disinformation and deception. They work through the media in explaining to every time there's a jihad terror attack or a plot in the United States, for example, the media then goes to various Islamic organizations whose spokesmen say that Islam has nothing to do with this, and these things were not done in the name of Islam, even though they manifestly and obviously were. And that even worse, that the main concern that people should have is a backlash against innocent Muslims, with non-Muslims attacking them in rage over these plots, which never actually happens. But it is always the preoccupation of the mainstream media every time there's a jihad plot. And so this is the kind of way in which this disinformation proceeds, to try to shift the focus from the violence and the hatred that Muslims are perpetrating to Muslims as victims. The only defense we have is the truth. We don't have the government, we don't have the media, we don't have popular opinion. They have infiltrated every aspect of society and in a very sophisticated way have succeeded in advancing their agenda. But nonetheless, what they're saying is false. And so if we keep saying the truth, more and more people will see that it is indeed the truth. And that's the only thing that I can offer in that regard. You know, we can never give up and just keep going. I think that among Muslims, as among Christians and any other religious group, there are many people who call themselves by the name but don't pay attention to what the religion actually teaches. And then there are many people who do take it very seriously. The question would be, do Muslims who don't know or don't care about the Islamic political and supremacist agenda, are they likely to stand up against the Muslims who are advancing that agenda? And I think that's very unlikely, because they still identify themselves as Muslims. It's certainly a political dictatorship, and it is in a religious garment. I wouldn't go so far as, personally, I wouldn't go so far as to say that it's not a religion. A religion claims to relate man to God, and Islam does make that kind of claim. But certainly the political aspect of Islam, although it is most overlooked in the West, is the primary aspect of Islam. When you look into the Quran and into Muhammad's life, it's clear that what the agenda of the Islamic faith is to advance a political system, and only secondarily a religious one. So in that regard, absolutely, it is an authoritarian and repressive political system, primarily, and a religion second. There are many signs of a marriage between Islam and communism. They both have a totalitarian impulse. They both wish to establish an earthly utopia that is enforced by a reign of terror. The communists envision a society of complete justice and equality that is founded on torturing and killing those who get out of line. And that's essentially Islamic law also, that they will found the perfect Islamic society, and that would be one ruled by Islamic law, in which those who get out of line are stoned to death, or their limbs amputated, or they are killed in some other way. And so I think that they have a deep ideological affinity, and on a practical level, we see a very clear leftist Islamist alliance, such as with the Antifa group, the anti-fascists who came out in such a violent way at the Stuttgart demonstration yesterday in service of advancing essentially what the Sharia supremacists, the supremacists who are working toward establishing Islamic law here, working toward advancing their agenda. And so they work together. I think there's already a marriage between Islam and communism in Germany and in Europe in general, that the leftist Islamic supremacist alliance is already well advanced. Could there be a political system based on such a coalition? I think that's eminently possible as well. We saw it in Iran when the communists collaborated with the Islamic supremacists to overthrow the Shah, and then the coalition that resulted very quickly fell apart, and Khomeini and the mullahs forced out the communists. And I think that that's likely to be what would happen in this case as well, that the communists in Europe would ally, as they already have allied, with the Islamic supremacists. They come to power, and then the communists will discover that they could not ride this tiger, they could not control this beast, and they will be forced out and murdered as well, and Islamic states established. I think that this is because Islam has a greater hold on its people, and ultimately is even more brutal than communism, and that especially European communism after the fall of the Soviet Union is not such a force as to be able to withstand the terror that the Muslims would unleash. So it is likely that there would be, if they are not stopped, of course, which I still hope that they would be, that there would be coalitions of Muslims and communists taking power, but then turning upon each other, and I would expect that the communists would not prevail in that. Well, that's exactly the problem, that it is a poisonous ideology. And so we certainly could envision a scenario, which I expect is already happening, in mosques in Germany, where hatred against unbelievers and violence against them is being preached. And then Muslims will act upon that violence, like we saw in Frankfurt at the airport, with the massacre of a couple of American soldiers by a Muslim a few months ago. Probably he was exhorted in some way to carry out this jihad. Whether, however, he was told by an imam in a mosque to do this or not is something that we can't be sure of, and it wouldn't even be necessary, because all he has to do is read the Quran. And in America we have had several Muslims try to kill unbelievers when they had no connection to mosques or to any Islamic group, but they just read the Quran. Mohammad Reza Tahrir-Yazar was a Muslim in North Carolina who rented a truck and drove it onto a university campus, and he tried to run over students. And he ended up injuring 9 students before he was stopped. And he explained that he was not part of Al-Qaeda, he was not part of any other group, he was not even with the Muslim Students Association there, but he just read the Quran, and he saw that he had a responsibility before Allah to wage war against unbelievers, and so he did. So if the same thing would happen in Germany, and probably already has, that there wouldn't be any warning signs necessarily, or any warning signs that we would see, because what they preach in the mosques is not public anyway, and then you would see the plot or the attack occur. The plan is not really something that is some kind of a concerted effort now, although there is, specifically in regard to Israel, certainly genocidal aspirations and intentions. And Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, has made that very clear when he said he wants the Jews to go to Israel because that would save them the trouble of hunting them down all over the world and killing them internationally.